I worked night shifts at a regional hospital 3 years ago. I was 30 years old then, a nurse, trying to support my sick mom. Night after night, I roamed the cold, sterile hallways. The hospital was old, and the lights flickered, casting shadows on the faded teal walls. I thought I was used to the quiet. I thought wrong. On my third night that week, something felt different. As I walked past room 204, I saw movement out of the corner of my eye. I turned my head quickly, but there was nothing there. Just dim light and silence. I shook it off and focused on my patients. But as the nights continued, I began to see those same shadows more often. They darted away whenever I tried to look. I convinced myself I was just exhausted. The hospital was busy. I had a lot to handle. It was easy to ignore the whispers that began to weave through the stillness. Soft voices floated around me, fading away before I could catch the words. I tried not to think about it. I reminded myself I was just tired. One night, I entered the break room. I found one of the patients staring wide-eyed at the ceiling. I asked if she was all right. Her gaze didn't leave that spot. "That woman won't stop watching me," she said. My heart raced. I pressed for details. "What woman?" She shook her head. "You wouldn't believe me." Each night felt heavier. I often glanced over my shoulder. The shadows turned into something else, a presence creeping under my skin. The whispers grew louder but never clear. I could feel something behind me, but spinning around always left me alone. The patients unnerved me most. They talked about a dark figure, a face they couldn't remember. They said it watched them while they tried to sleep. I wanted to help them, but they were more frightened than I could understand. I kept telling myself it was all in my head. But every time I walked those halls, I felt their fear growing inside me. Then, one night, I stepped into the waiting room. It was empty. My heart started to pound. I turned and froze in place. There, in the doorway, stood a figure. It was just a shadow, I told myself, but it felt real. It was watching me, and I shivered. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I turned back to the empty room and whispered a prayer for morning to come. But then I heard it, a soft voice right beside me. "Why didn't you help them?" I turned, but no one was there. My heart raced. I thought I was losing my mind. But when I caught a glimpse of the figure again, I was sure of one thing. I was being watched, without any way to understand why. The next night, I entered the hospital with a heavy heart. The air felt thick, like it was holding secrets I wasn't ready to confront. I tried to shake off the unease as I made my way to the nurses' station. The usual sounds of beeping monitors and distant voices seemed muted, swallowed by the oppressive silence. As I walked towards room 204, I felt a chill run down my spine. I hesitated, remembering the unsettling movements I had seen there before. My instincts told me to keep walking, to focus on my patients, but I couldn't ignore the pull of curiosity. I approached the door and stared at the number, feeling a sense of dread wash over me. It was as if the room itself was alive, breathing. I could almost hear it calling me. I took a deep breath and pushed the door open. The light flickered inside, revealing a patient lying in bed. She was staring blankly at the wall, her eyes unblinking. "Hey there," I said softly. "How are you feeling?" She turned to me slowly, her expression vacant. "She's here," she whispered, her voice trembling. "She's always here." A cold sweat broke out on my back. "Who?" I asked, forcing the words out. "The woman in the shadows," she replied, her gaze drifting past me. "She wants you to see her." I felt my heart race again. I stepped back, the room closing in on me. "You need to rest," I said, trying to sound calm. I turned to leave, feeling the weight of her stare on my back. But I couldn't shake the feeling. My resolve crumbled as I made my way down the hall. I glanced over my shoulder repeatedly, every flicker of light making my pulse quicken. I headed towards the break room, desperate for a moment of peace. Inside, I poured myself a cup of coffee. The steam curled up, wrapping around me like a comforting blanket. But then I heard it again, soft whispers. They drifted through the air, threading between the machines and walls. "Help us," they pleaded. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing myself to focus. "I'm here," murmured. "What do you want?" The whispers grew more urgent, echoing off the walls. "You have to see her," they urged. Suddenly, a loud crash erupted from the direction of room 204. My heart sank. I dropped the cup and it shattered at my feet. Adrenaline surged through my body as I dashed toward the sound. When I reached the room, the door swung open on its own. I stepped inside, the shadows pooling thickly in the corners. The patient was gone. The bed lay empty, sheets pulled back as if she had vanished into thin air. Then I noticed something on the floor, a small, old photograph. I picked it up, my hands shaking. It showed a group of women, and at the center was a familiar face, the patient. But behind her, in the shadows, I saw it, the outline of the dark figure I had been sensing all along. Suddenly, the lights flickered violently before everything went dark. I froze in place, my breath caught in my throat. I waited, suspended in darkness. My heart pounded in my chest, a harsh reminder of the reality I was in. I thought of the photograph and the woman who had vanished. "What's happening?" I whispered, trying to mask my fear. Then a glow flickered back to life, illuminating the edges of the room. Shadows danced on the walls, alive and restless. I strained my eyes, searching for any hint of the patient. The emptiness was palpable, but the air felt electrified. Something was wrong. Suddenly, I heard it again, the whispering. It was closer now, almost threatening. "Help us," it implored, softer yet filled with urgency. "Find her." I felt cold sweat trickle down my spine. "Whom?" I shouted into the suffocating air. The lights brightened, and I caught a glimpse of movement in the corner. The figure I had seen in the photograph, a shadowy woman, just out of focus. I blinked rapidly, convincing myself it was an illusion. But she didn't disappear. Instead, she pointed toward the far wall. I followed her gesture. There, a loose tile caught my attention. It looked out of place, just slightly ajar. My instinct screamed at me to leave, to run. But I felt a compulsion to approach. Slowly, I went to the wall, my hands trembling. The whispers intensified. "Help us. Find her." With a deep breath, I knelt down and pried at the tile. It came free with an unsettling scrape that echoed through the room. I pulled it aside, and a dark hole gaped back at me. I could feel a chilling draft wafting out, carrying the scent of musk and something else, something rotten. A curious yet overwhelming dread seeped into my bones. I glanced back, half expecting to see the patient or the shadow standing behind me. But I was alone again. Urging myself onward, I leaned closer and reached into the cavity. My fingers brushed against something solid. I pulled it out. It was a small, dust-covered box, old and heavy. My pulse raced as I opened it. Inside, I found a collection of items: a locket, a rusted key, and several faded newspaper clippings. I hurriedly splayed them out before me. One of the articles caught my eye, a headline about a long-missing woman, a patient who had disappeared from the hospital decades ago. Everything in me froze. The face in the photograph, the familiar one in the middle, was her. I gasped, realization slamming into me. The whispers formed a distinct word now, clearer than before. Protect. Before I could process what it meant, the lights once again flickered violently. A bone-chilling laugh echoed in the room, reverberating off the walls. The air grew heavy. I could feel a presence, the oppressive weight of the shadows pressing down on me. Panic flooded my mind. I scrambled to my feet and moved toward the door, but it slammed shut. The sound echoed like a final warning. I turned, heart racing, knowing full well that something was lurking in the darkness, ready to confront me. Then, just past the shadows, I saw her, the woman from the photograph, staring at me with hollow eyes, her mouth slowly curling into a smile that sent a shiver down my spine. I could hardly breathe. The woman's smile stretched wider, too wide, her hollow eyes never leaving mine. Fear coiled around me, making it hard to think. I took a step back, the cold tile pressing against my feet, but she only tilted her head, as if studying my reaction. "Who are you?" I managed to choke out. My voice trembled, but I needed an answer. The papers I had just found lay forgotten on the floor, each clipping a small window into a tragedy I could barely comprehend. The laugh echoed again, bouncing off the walls, sending ripples of dread through me. The shadows seemed to grow denser, swirling around her, wrapping her in darkness. I couldn't look away from the figure before me. Words formed in my throat, but they tangled together, suffocating me with their weight. Suddenly, the lights flickered more violently, plunging me into darkness before sputtering back to life. The woman had stepped closer, and for a moment I felt a pull in my chest, a magnetic force that kept me from turning away. "Help us," she whispered, the urgency in her voice cutting through the tension. "Help who? What do you want?" I demanded, more defiantly than I felt. The key still burned the hole in my pocket. I had to get out of this room, yet a strange consciousness urged me to stay. My instincts screamed to flee, but something deeper compelled me to understand. "Protect," she repeated, her voice softening. "You must protect us." Her grin started to fade, replaced by an expression of desperation. Then, just as quickly, darkness swept back over her, and I was alone again. I stumbled backward, my heart pounding in my ears. It was as if the room itself was closing in on me. I could feel the walls shifting, the shadows thickening. An overpowering instinct told me I needed to leave, but the moment I reached for the door, it rattled violently, as if something on the other side was blocking my escape. "Don't go." The woman's voice was both distant and near, a haunting echo that rattled my very soul. She was gone, but the weight of her presence lingered, filling the air with a foreboding energy. I turned back to the tile and the box. My hand shook as I reached down to pick up the newspaper clippings again. "Missing woman found," read one headline. The photograph showed the same hollow-eyed woman, but beneath it the caption was sinister. "It's too late for her. Will anyone answer the call?" Just as I thought I found clarity, a new noise erupted, a scratching coming from the corner. It grew louder, more aggressive. I turned to face it, hoping it was just my imagination, but then I saw it. A shadow creeping out of the dark, forming a shape that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. "I need to protect her." The whisper seemed to swirl through the air, and panic washed over me once again. I took a step back, heart thrumming, as the shadow inched closer. Then Everything went dark. The darkness enveloped me, thick and suffocating. I blinked, trying to will the shadows away. My heart raced, matching the frantic beating in my chest. I had to move, but didn't know which way was safe. Every flicker of light felt like an echo of that woman's eyes, watching me from somewhere just out of reach. Suddenly, I heard it, a sound that broke through the silence. A low, guttural growl emerged from the shadows nearby. My breath hitched as I forced my feet to inch back, trying to navigate the space I could barely see. The fear gnawed at me, but I steadied my resolve. I couldn't stay here. Then, in a moment of desperation, I reached for anything that might serve as a weapon. My fingers brushed against the box I had dropped earlier, feeling its rough edges through the bag of clippings. I needed to find a way to defend myself, but as I gripped it tighter, my attention snapped toward the low vibration building from the corner. The growl grew louder, more distinct, and I realized it wasn't alone. There was rustling, movement behind the darkened curtain. The urge to flee clawed at me again. I couldn't face whatever was hiding in there. But rooted in place, I saw a soft glow, an ember of light against the tide of oppressive dark. "Help us," whispered a voice again, the same dulcet tone from before. My skin crawled with dread. "Why should I?" I yelled, anger squeezing through my fear. "You're the one that brought all this on me." Silence swallowed my words. The growl stopped. I dared to step forward, towards the fleeting glow. As I approached, it intensified, revealing a figure crouched low, half hidden by the curtain. It was a man, but his features were too indistinct to make out clearly, fading in and out like a bad signal on a television. "Don't ignore me," his voice cracked, sending shockwaves through me. "You're meant to end this." "End what?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. "What am I supposed to do?" He pointed toward the box in my hands. I squeezed it tighter. "You have to uncover the truth." "Why should I trust you?" The shadows were pressing closer again, as if drawn by our interaction. They seemed to be alive, coiling and writhing as they sought to merge. "You don't have a choice," he shouted, desperation pouring from his words. "It won't wait. They're coming." Before I could respond, the shadows surged forward, snapping their invisible tendrils like claws. The ember flickered and began to vanish. I stumbled back, panic blinding me to any reasonable thought. I had to move, had to escape, but escape into what? That's when I saw it, a faint glimmer in the corner of the room. A keyhole. Instinct kicked in. Maybe my key could fit. I sprinted, heart pounding, the growls intensifying behind me. I had no idea what I was racing toward, or if it could save me. All I knew was that I had to try. I lunged for the keyhole, my fingers fumbling as I gripped the cold metal key that dangled from my neck. The darkness pressed in, heavy and suffocating, each growl growing closer. Could I really make it? As I neared the glimmer, I could see that it wasn't just any door. It looked old, with intricate carvings covering the surface, twisted and gnarly, as if they had been etched by the very shadows surrounding me. There was no time to hesitate. I jammed the key into the hole, praying it would open. With a forceful twist, I felt the mechanism click. The door swung open, revealing a narrow passageway lit by the same ember glow. I rushed inside, the shadows clawing at my back as I stumbled into the cramped space. The door slammed behind me, veiling the growls and whispers. I leaned against the wall of the passage, gasping for breath. The chilling relief lasted only a moment as the ember flickered wildly, illuminating the surroundings. To my right, shelves lined with dusty books leaned forward, like specters eager to spill their secrets. I remembered the man's words, uncover the truth. I could barely think straight, still reeling from the encounter. But now I had to focus. I stepped toward the nearest shelf, my fingers brushing against the spines of the books. The titles were faded, some even illegible, but one stood out, Shadows of the Past. I pulled it from the shelf, the dust swirling around me like miniature phantoms. The moment I opened it, the pages flipped on their own to a chapter marked by a tear. My breath hitched as I read the words inscribed there. Those who traverse dimensions must confront their greatest fears. There lies a key to align realms. A shiver ran down my spine. What did it mean? A sudden crash echoed from the door behind me. The shadows were being relentless, slamming against the door as if determined to break through. It dawned on me that I hadn't escaped. I had only postponed the inevitable. I flipped through the pages in panicked haste. I had to learn how to confront whatever was coming for me. Then I found something disturbing, a drawing showing the same figure I had seen just before the shadows had surged. Underneath it, a short passage read, "He watches and waits." I felt a chill in the air. My instinct screamed at me to leave, to run deeper into the passage, but I had no idea if that would be any safer. Would there be another exit, or was I walking into a trap? Then the door began to tremble, cracks spiderwebbing across its surface. They were getting through. I had to make a choice: stay here and search for answers, or flee down the passage where I might find escape, but also unknown dangers. I steadied my breath, sensing the pulsing dread behind me. I couldn't ignore it. I needed to find out who the man was and what he meant by "end this." Just then, a shattering sound erupted. Shadows slipped through the cracks, swallowing my thoughts in an icy grip. I spun around toward the passage, adrenaline coursing through my veins. Whatever I decided, I had to act now. I sprinted down the passage, heart pounding in my chest, as the shadows clawed at the door behind me. The ember glow flickered, creating long, dancing shadows that exaggerated my panic. I had no idea where the tunnel led, but standing still was no longer an option. "Don't look back," I muttered under my breath, forcing myself to stay focused on the dim light ahead. The passage narrowed further, and I squeezed through, brushing against the cold, damp walls. Then the door began to tremble, cracks spiderwebbing across its surface. They were getting through. I had to make a choice: stay here and search for answers, or flee down the passage where I might find escape, but also unknown dangers. I steadied my breath, sensing the pulsing dread behind me. I couldn't ignore it. I needed to find out who the man was and what he meant by "end this." Just then, a shattering sound erupted. Shadows slipped through the cracks, swallowing my thoughts in an icy grip. I spun around toward the passage, adrenaline coursing through my veins. Whatever I decided, I had to act now. I sprinted down the passage, heart pounding in my chest, as the shadows clawed at the door behind me. The ember glow flickered, creating long, dancing shadows that exaggerated my panic. I had no idea where the tunnel led, but standing still was no longer an option. "Don't look back," I muttered under my breath, forcing myself to stay focused on the dim light ahead. The passage narrowed further, and I squeezed through, brushing against the cold, damp walls. My fingers trailed the surface, searching for anything that might offer a clue or help me understand what I had stumbled into. The flickering light guided me forward, illuminating strange symbols carved into the stones. Each one matched the jagged patterns I remembered from the door. I stopped short, realization striking me. Was I moving through a gateway, one that could change my fate? That's when I heard it, whispers drifting through the air, soft but distinct, like shadows trying to convey a message. I strained to catch the words, my pulse racing.
"You must remember," the voices repeated, echoing off the walls. Did they speak to me, or was it a trick of my mind? As I pressed onward, I found another bookcase, this one leaning precariously to one side, filled with more aged tomes. I reached out, half afraid of what I might disturb. Without thinking, I yanked a book free. It slid out easily, as though it wanted to be in my hands. The title read, "The Keeper of Secrets." I opened it, feeling an ominous weight in the air. The pages were yellowed, brittle, but they came alive with every word I read. The stories inside were horrifying, tales of creatures that thrived on fear and darkness, lurking in the spaces between worlds. And right in the middle, I found a passage about the very thing that haunted me. Those who watch are bound by their own shadows, feed on the fear of their prey. You are not the first to feel their gaze. The realization twisted my stomach. I wasn't just running from shadows. Something was waiting for me. An icy draft swept through the passage, making me shiver. I could feel them, those unseen watchers. I had to push forward. I flipped through the pages, desperation flooding me. Then a folded piece of parchment slipped out and fluttered to the ground. I picked it up delicately and opened it. It was a map of the very place I was in, filled with cryptic notations and arrows directing me deeper into the passage. At the end, one word stood out: freedom. But the door behind me groaned again, the shadows pressing in. My time was running out. If I stayed too long, I would be consumed by whatever had been hunting me. I shoved the map into my pocket, slid the book back onto its shelf, and took a deep breath. As I turned to move further, I heard a voice, a low whisper that sent chills down my spine. "You won't escape this time." I spun around, but the passage was empty. No sign of the creature, just darkness creeping closer. I had to go. That whisper echoed in my mind as I sprinted away. What lay ahead? I couldn't tell. But I couldn't let fear dictate my fate. I pressed on, trapped between the solace of knowledge and the terror pursuing me. With every step through the darkness, I felt the weight of the shadows growing heavier, promising that this was only the beginning. I slammed into the next stretch of the passage, nearly losing my footing on the uneven stones. My breath came in short bursts, fogging the air ahead. Each step felt like a gamble, a reckless dash into uncertainty. The whispers intensified behind me, almost mocking my flight. "Keep going," I whispered fiercely. I needed to drown out the unsettling sounds. The dim light flickering ahead became my sole focus. I had to believe it led to freedom. As I navigated the narrow space, I noticed that the markings on the walls grew chaotic, intertwining in spirals and arcs. They shifted like living things, warping my sense of direction. I pressed my palm against a rough section, feeling a pulse beneath it. A heartbeat, maybe? I recoiled. Panic surged as I realized what that could mean. But curiosity pulled at me. I traced my fingers across the symbols, seeking something to ground me in this labyrinth. Suddenly, the ground trembled beneath me, and I stumbled backward, holding my breath in terror. Then, just ahead, I spotted a translucent glow, brightening the darkness. It flickered like a beacon, beckoning. I approached slowly, heart racing. Was this my escape, or a lure? As I drew closer, the glow morphed into a doorway framed by ancient runes. I hesitated, unable to shake the feeling that something was wrong, but I stepped through it anyway. A rush of new energy flowed over me, revitalizing after the dread that had permeated my run through the tunnels. The room beyond was vast, filled with towering shelves of ancient records, illuminated by orbs of warm light hovering in the air. I felt like I had crossed into another realm.
Yet a presence lingered, gnawing at the back of my mind. In the center, a massive table was strewn with scrolls and artifacts. Instinctively, I reached for one, a leather-bound journal, its spine cracked and faded. I opened it, eager for answers, but the inscribed words twisted and danced, resisting comprehension. Then I saw a drawing tucked between its pages, a figure cloaked in shadows, its face obscured. An unsettling familiarity washed over me. I searched my memory. Had I seen this before? That's when I heard it again, a voice, unmistakably clear this time. You should have never come here. A chill shot through me. I spun around, heart pounding, and froze. The figure from the drawing stood before me, only now it was no longer just a drawing. The air in the room thickened, and the shadows seemed to stretch towards me like creeping vines. I couldn't think. I could only react. "What do you want?" I shouted, but my voice trembled and barely echoed. The figure moved closer, enveloped in shadow, yet oddly human in form. "You have the map," it replied. "That means you must make a choice." And suddenly, the paths forward seemed to multiply, each one pulsating with promise and peril. My heart raced with questions. What choices, and at what cost? With the figure looming, I realized this was only the beginning. There was much more at stake than I thought. I took a step back, weighing my options, knowing that this moment might seal my fate forever. Would I confront the truths hidden in these shadows, or find a way to escape them once and for all? I stood frozen, heart pounding, trapped between fear and uncertainty. The figure loomed before me, a living shadow that seemed to absorb the very light around it. I opened my mouth to speak again, but nothing came out. Instead, I felt a cold sweat forming on my forehead. What kind of choice?" I finally managed to whisper, my voice barely audible. The shadow shifted, its form rippling like water disturbed by a stone. "You hold the key to the past," it said, "but it comes at a cost. Choose wisely, for the wrong decision could condemn more than just yourself." I tried to process those words. Was I truly involved in something that affected others? My mind raced back to the journal, the map. What had I stumbled into? Around me, the room felt alive. The shadows on the walls danced as if sharing secrets I wasn't meant to hear. I needed clarity. "What's on the map?" I asked, desperate for answers. The figure tilted its head, the obscured face hinting at amusement or perhaps annoyance. "It leads to truths buried deep," it said cryptically. "But some truths are best left undisturbed." I clenched the journal in my hands, its rough leather grounding me in this moment. "If I follow the map, what then?" The figure raised an arm, seemingly pointing to a shelf filled with scrolls. "Find what is lost. The choice between knowledge and ignorance lies before you. Will you seek the wisdom hidden in the scrolls, or will you flee from what you fear?" Every instinct yelled at me to flee, but the thought of remaining in ignorance felt unbearable. I couldn't turn back now. I took a hesitant step toward the shelves, scanning the spines. Some scrolls shimmered, others emitted a faint hum, like they were alive. I reached out, fingers trembling. Then I felt it, a jolt through my fingertips. The moment I made contact, a flash of images flooded my mind. A dark cavern, a crying child, and the same cloaked figure. I stumbled back, gasping. What was happening? "Enough!" The figure's voice was sharp, a command that sliced through the chaos in my mind. "Do not let the past consume you. Choose your path now." I looked back at the creature, feeling the weight of its gaze. I had no time to waste.
Suddenly, I had an idea. If I choose to learn the truth, will you help me navigate what I find? It paused, and the shadows around it seemed to ripple in contemplation. Very well, it replied slowly. But understand, what I help you uncover will not be the end of your journey. Sometimes it is the beginning of something far worse. A flicker of doubt washed over me. I was standing on the edge of something vast, and it felt like I was about to plunge into the unknown. Before I could question further, the lights around the room flickered violently, and the air grew heavy. Then everything went dark. I felt my heart race. Was I losing my mind?
The darkness was absolute, pressing in on me from all sides. It was a suffocating silence that made my skin crawl. That's when I heard it, the unmistakable sound of footsteps echoing in the void. Someone, or something, was approaching. My instincts kicked in, and I bolted toward what I hoped was the room's exit. My heart thudded in my chest, each beat resonating with the growing anxiety wrapped around me. The air felt charged with a palpable energy, making every hair on my body stand on end. I skidded to a halt, acutely aware of how foolish it would be to run blindly into the unknown. Instead, I tried focusing on my breath, listening for the movements echoing in the nothingness. The shadowy figure was closer now, the footsteps resonating deeply, distorted like an echo in a vast canyon. "Who are you?" I called into the dark, my voice wavering but determined. An icy silence greeted me for a moment. Then the air shifted. "You don't remember me," a voice rasped, smooth yet filled with layers of contempt. "But I've been watching you." I wanted to deny it, to shout back that I was no one worth watching, but something deep inside told me that I was more than an innocent nurse caught in a tempest. "What do you want with me?" A soft laugh escaped the shadows, chilling me to the bone. "Everything," it whispered. "You are the thread that could unravel this tapestry of fear and despair." I could almost picture the shadowish figure grinning, a cruel celebration of power. A surge of resolve coursed through me. If I was the key to this web, I needed to set things right. What do I need to do? Suddenly, blinding light pierced through the darkness, flooding the room and illuminating the figure. Its features were now visible, and they twisted in a malevolent way that made my stomach churn. The presence was neither human nor entirely ethereal. I held my breath, emotions swirling into a storm of fear and defiance. "Embrace the truth or be consumed," it hissed. "Your choice. But remember, knowledge has its price." I couldn't shake the feeling that it spoke of the deep layers of my own past intertwined with the shadows. "What did you do to the missing patients?" I shouted, realizing I was caught in the heart of their tragedy. "Found them, freed them from the constraints of your world," it retorted, scandalously satisfied. "They are happy now, whispering in the darkness, waiting for only one like you to finally see them." My mind raced back, the photograph, the woman's hollow eyes, the people's fears. "You mean to chain me to it?" "Chain? No. You are the anchor, the bridge. You will choose how this ends." The figure's voice curled around me, teasing, daring, wrapping me in its malevolence. They'll never let you go. Not now, not ever. With that, I felt the floor beneath me tremble and shift like a living thing.
The walls closed in. Shadowed forms flanked me. Hints of familiar faces flickered in half-formed patches of light. A child, the patient's. I realized I buried their cries within myself. I pressed my palms against my ears, fighting the suffocating cacophony. There was a choice here, buried within the chaos. But would I be brave enough to confront the shadows? Decide, the figure commanded. Will you step into the light or embrace the darkness? Only you hold the key to your fate. In that moment of reckoning, I thought of each patient who had suffered alone, of how their cries had haunted me as I worked night shifts. I remembered the whispers, their fear, my ineffectual help. I took a deep breath. I choose to unearth the truth, to confront the darkness. I refuse to be bound by your deception. And with every syllable, I felt a flood of warmth wash over me, the shadows recoiling from my defiance. The oppressive weight began to lift, replaced by a blaring light that surged forward in waves like a cleansing tide. The figure shrieked, the sound cascading like broken glass. No, you cannot escape your destiny. But I could feel the power of my own choices driving the light forward, pushing aside the darkness, dragging the malevolence back into the void from where it came. A final pull, a final burst, and everything blurred, glimmering with a dazzling weightlessness. Then, with a blinding flash, I was catapulted out of the chamber and back into the ordinary sounds of the hospital, the sterile smell of antiseptic flooding in. I stumbled, disoriented, standing at the nurse's station with chaos softly ringing in my ears. A normal night on shift with no shadows in sight. The world felt eerily comfortable, yet I could still sense the weight of lingering spectral whispers, subtly weaving their way back into the fabric of reality. Welcome back. My gaze snapped to Angela, my fellow nurse, who eyed me with concern. You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. I managed a tight smile, the truth swirling behind my lips. Just a rough night, I replied, still grappling with what felt like a heavy cloak on my shoulders. As I walked down the hallway, resolute but heavy with unspoken truths, I wondered about the patients, the missing souls, and what I had truly unleashed. Had I put an end to the darkness, or merely pushed it elsewhere? I took a deep breath, knowing these questions would haunt me indefinitely, just as they had the patients before me. A part of my mind remained tied to the restless shadows, and even now I could feel them watching, lurking in the corners of existence, always waiting. And though I felt the weight lift, I knew it had merely shifted, casting a long shadow over the choices yet to come. I moved through the hospital, the familiar fluorescent lights flickering softly above, unsure whether I was really free, or if I had merely traded one darkness for another. Welcome back. My gaze snapped to Angela, my fellow nurse, who eyed me with concern. You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. I managed a tight smile, the truth swirling behind my lips. Just a rough night, I replied, still grappling with what felt like a heavy cloak on my shoulders. As I walked down the hallway, resolute but heavy with unspoken truths, I wondered about the patients, the missing souls, and what I had truly unleashed. Had I put an end to the darkness, or merely pushed it elsewhere? I took a deep breath, knowing these questions would haunt me indefinitely, just as they had the patients before me. A part of my mind remained tied to the restless shadows, and even now I could feel them watching, lurking in the corners of existence, always waiting. And though I felt the weight left, I knew it had merely shifted, casting a long shadow over the choices yet to come. I moved through the hospital, the familiar fluorescent lights flickering softly above, unsure whether I was really free, or if I had merely traded one darkness for another.